بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. We're on Hadith 82. باب من أعاد الحديث ثلاثا ليفهم عنه. This chapter translated as the Prophet ﷺ would repeat what he said 3 times so that it's understood. So عن أنس رضي الله تعالى عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه كان إذا تكلم بكلمة أعادها ثلاثا حتى تفهم عنه وإذا أتى على قوم فسلم عليهم سلم ثلاثا. Roughly translated, the Prophet ﷺ, when he would say something, he would repeat it 3 times. And if he passes by a people and he says Salaam alaikum to them, he would say it 3 times. Why? To make sure that everybody heard. That's it. And when you're talking to a group of people, it is very normal, very expected that some aren't going to be paying attention at that moment. Their mind wanders off, and then they come back to reality, and then they start listening again. Same thing when you say salam to somebody. How many times does it happen to you when you would pass by and say salamu alaikum, and the other person thinks you didn't say salamu alaikum because they didn't hear you? It happens a lot, right? So to avoid any misunderstandings, the Prophet ﷺ would repeat things 3 times. Right? Now, I'm not saying that if the Imam gives a khutbah or the Khatib gives a khutbah, they should repeat what they say 3 times. That'd be very redundant, right? But if you're saying something, like I'm giving an announcement, I'll probably say it twice. But I'll say it twice in 2 different ways, right? To make sure that everybody's paying attention. So that's the idea here. So part of knowledge is being patient with disseminating that knowledge, with teaching other people. And you all, as parents, you understand this. Kids need to be told multiple times. And it's very frustrating to the parent because they think that the child is ignoring them. That's not what's happening. The child's mind is just not ready to focus the way an adult focuses. A child is easily distracted. A child is concerned and thinking about playing, about toys. Right? That's what they're thinking about. So it is part of parenting that you repeat the idea over and over again. In fact, when you look at how to instill Islamic principles in your children or in a child's mind, it's really 3 phases. You have to teach them the idea 3 times, right? And each time you give them a different element with a different goal. So the first time you're simply bringing it to their awareness, right? You want them to get aware that, hey, there's this thing. Like, let's just say the name of Allah, Al-Khaliq. Allah, one of Allah's names is Al-Khaliq, the creator. That's the first phase. You get them aware of the information. The second phase is ghars, to root it. Okay, well, why do I need to know that Allah is Al-Khaliq? What does that mean to me? What does that mean for me? Why should I hold on to this piece of information? And then after that, the third time is at-ta'ziz. You reinforce it. You want it to stay with them, right? So you reinforce it by showing them how it's relevant to their day-to-day lives, how they can see it in their day-to-day lives. And the fact of the matter is, with time, if that reinforcement isn't happening continually, they will forget a little bit, and then you kind of go back to the previous phase, the ghars, the rooting, and you repeat that, and then you see what I mean here? The idea is the human mind is not going to grab on and hold on to everything it hears, and that it needs repetition. And perhaps the most telling example, right? The most telling example is the following. It said that the Prophet, in a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ would, he himself, line up the rows of salah. He'd go to the companions and line them up, right? And he kept doing that over and over and over again in all the salahs until the narrator of the hadith says, حَتَّى إِذَا عَقِلْنَا, until we finally got it. We understood, okay, we got the idea that we had to stand in rows. Now, who are these people? They're adults. These are adults. And the idea of standing shoulder to shoulder in a straight line shouldn't be that complicated. And who are these people? They're the best of the best. These are the people who put their lives and their wealth on the line for Islam. Yet here you have the Prophet, for a period of time, repeating the same request. Stand shoulder to shoulder. And the narrator himself is saying, until we finally got it. We got the idea that, hey, when we get up for salah, we have to be shoulder to shoulder. And even then, the hadith continues, one individual was a little bit forward. All right? It was a little. So it takes a while for people to get it. It takes a while for people to kind of root this thing. And I'm not justifying it, but take, for example, the civil rights movement in America. To end Jim Crow law, which were laws inherently racist towards blacks, and to end segregation. Right? This was presented in 1964 or 1965. Right? Segregation, seeing signs that this is whites only and blacks only, continued until the early 80s.
80s?
Yes. Look at sit down. We think that in 1964 it was the end of khalas, that's it, it's done. No, it took America 20 years extra for the population to get rid of the previous way of looking at things and to adopt a new one. And until this day, there are certain areas that are more racist than others. Right? Why am I presenting? Not to justify, say, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it, and just accept what it is. No. But the idea is when you deal with people, you have to take them for who they are. Right? You have to appreciate the way Allah created people. They don't change automatically. They don't change overnight. It takes time. Even the best of the best took time for certain ideas to root in their hearts. Had the first commands of the Quran been, don't drink alcohol, what would they have done? They would have drank alcohol. And it took 15, 16, 17 years before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala started to really say, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. So they finally got it, right? So people require patience, and dealing with them requires patience. And part of the effective way is to repeat what's being said. I was listening to the previous CEO of PepsiCo. She was giving a class on leadership and whatnot. And she talks about how good leadership, like everything that happens at the top, everything inside at the top trickles down to the bottom. So if you are the CEO of a company, what you say, what you do, what you decide will affect the workers who are stocking shelves in Target and Walmart with your product. Right? That's how it works. And that you need to develop the way of taking complex ideas and making it easier for anyone to understand. She said that this is how she summarized leadership. Taking complex ideas and simplifying it enough to where everybody understands it. Right? And this is precisely Islam. This is precisely the Prophet ﷺ. There's a book, I don't know if I already told you about it, there's a book I recently read called The Preaching of Islam. The Preaching of Islam. And this is a book written by an Englishman, somebody from Britain, when? 1896. 1896, Western researchers knew a lot about Islam. They knew everything about Islam. They knew Islamic history, they knew how Islam spread, why it spread. And he's talking about why people accepted Islam in mass numbers. Right? Why these areas, like what was once Persia, what was once Roman land, and was once Christian or whatever religion, are now predominantly Muslim. What happened? You know how they say Islam spread with a sword? They keep saying this, till this day. He, in 1896, said this notion that Islam spread by the sword is utter nonsense. So all this stuff that we hear is propaganda. It's politics, right? It's just drama making. It's not people who really think it. Anyway, he said one of the reasons in his conclusion, he put 6 or 7 reasons why Islam spreads, why people accept Islam. And one of the reasons is because it's easy to understand. It's simple. It takes very complex ideas, like Allah's existence, and makes it so easy for a person to understand. Right? So easy. It takes complex things like spirituality, your relationship to Allah, and simplifies it in a few things to where anyone and everyone can understand it. Right? So here's the leadership of the Prophet ﷺ in action. باب تعليم الرجل أمته وأهله. The chapter on a man teaching his slave or his family, right? Just let's reword it. A man teaching his family. عن أبي موسى رضي الله تعالى عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثلاثة لهم أجران رجل من أهل الكتاب آمن بنبيه وآمن بمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم والعبد المملوك إذا أدى حق الله تعالى وحق مواليه ورجل كانت عنده أمة يطأها فأدبها فأحسن تأديبها وعلمها فأحسن تعليمها ثم أعتقها فتزوجها فله أجران. All right. In this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says there are three categories of people who will get double reward. Like anything they do, they get double the reward because they're in one of these categories. One, somebody who was a Christian or a Jew and became a believer of Islam and a believer in Muhammad ﷺ. For them is double reward. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points this out in the Quran. Right? الَّذِينَ آتَيْنَاهُمُ الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ هُمْ بِهِ يُؤْمِنُونَ until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ أَجْرَهُمْ مَرَّتَيْنِ بِمَا صَبَرُوا. People of the book who believe, for them is double their reward because of their patience. Why is it double reward? They get the reward of their sincere following of Musa or Isa. And then the reward for following Muhammad ﷺ. So they get the reward of trying to sincerely practice what they thought was truth. Right? So what they were doing as Christians or Jews, sincerely, they thought what they were doing was pleasing to Allah. They get reward for that. Right? And then they get the reward of being Muslim and following Islam. The second category, a slave who fulfills the rights of Allah and the rights of his master. Right? The slave, so if you think of a slave, they have to obey Allah and they have to obey who? The one who owns them, their master. Right? So this person fulfills the role, the rights of each. For them is double reward. The reward of fulfilling Allah's rights and the reward of fulfilling his master's rights. Right? Now, the whole idea of slavery, the question of slavery, I think is a question that has been answered. Right? It is one of what I call the silly attacks against Islam. This is a silly attack against Islam. The claim that Islam was spread by the sword is a silly attack against Islam. The attack against Islam in terms of Aisha's age when she got married is a silly attack. It's nonsense. Why do I say silly? Is because that's how the world functioned back then. This wasn't an Islamic thing. You don't only find Muslims doing this. Aisha got married at the age of puberty. So did every other woman and man at that time. Research shows that the age of consent back then was puberty. When you hit puberty, East, West, Muslim, non-Muslim, they all saw a person who hit puberty, who passed puberty as an adult. Right? So it's a silly attack. Now, Islam, the question that people ask is, why didn't Islam abolish slavery the way it abolished interest? Right? It's a fair question. The Prophet ﷺ came in the Hajjatul Wada, in the farewell sermon, and abolished interest entirely. He could have done the same for slavery. Why didn't he? And the answer is as follows. If the Prophet ﷺ was here today, and you have interest, you have the institution of interest, and you have human trafficking, which is modern day slavery. It's slavery, right? Human trafficking. And the Prophet today gave the sermon, the farewell sermon, Khutbatul Wada. I would argue that he would abolish human trafficking and say this is completely haram and wouldn't say anything about interest. Why? Not because one is not haram and the other is, but because interest is so rooted in the global economy. If you were to take it out, the entire global economy would collapse. It would utterly collapse. Really? Yeah. You know, the entire world is complaining of inflation, right? The entire world. Why? Because the currency of the world is tied to what? The dollar. No, the dollar. So this idea that there's something that affects the global economy is not strange. We see it right in front of our eyes. This is why BRICS, the BRICS nations, right, want to try and create a new currency. Because they're sick and tired of their currency being affected by America and what goes on in America. Right? Interest is the same thing. Right? Interest governs everything. This is why Muslim nations are forced to enter into interest. You can't do without it. It's just the way it is today. Right? So if you were to remove it all at once, the entire global economy would collapse. Rather, what needs to be done is a gradual, right, detachment from the interest-based economy. Right? You have to gradually detach yourself from it. You can't just do it all at once. Turkey tried doing it and they got hit hard. Right? Their economy is a mess right now. The inflation is astronomically high. This is one of the reasons why. Right? Similarly, back in the time of the Prophet, societies depended tremendously on slaves. Tremendously. At the economic level, at the agricultural level, right? At even the family level. At the family level, they needed slaves to look after their children while they go to work. This was the reality, right? Now, what would happen if all of a sudden they closed down schools in America? How am I going to go to work? Where am I going to put my kids? See what I mean here? So the Prophet didn't abolish slavery immediately because of the harms it would cause to the global society. Right? Rather, Islam put us on a course to gradually do away with and abolish slavery. Gradually. Could it have been done quicker? Sure. But the idea, the question of why didn't the Prophet abolish slavery from the start, this is my answer to it. Why he abolished interest? Because interest wasn't rooted in the economy. Certain wealthy people did it. That's it. All right? And finally, and this is the point of the chapter, وَرَجُلٌ كَانَتْ عِنْدَهُ أَمَةٌ. A man who had a female concubine, a female slave, and he treated her well, he raised her, meaning he taught her the ways, he built her personality, and he taught her, meaning she became skilled, she became informed, and then he frees her and marries her. For him is double the reward. He gets 2 rewards for everything he does. Right? Why? His good treatment, right, of this person who normally people would mistreat. He invested in her. Right? He helped her reach her own dreams. Right? I mean, look at the nice treatment. In our times today, women wish they had a husband like that who would give her the same type of treatment, right? So it's a pretty noble thing. Why is he getting double the reward? He's getting the reward for treating her well and getting the reward of her being a productive member of society. Because when she's out and about, she will help other people, she will benefit other people. Or when he marries her and she has kids, those characteristics, those qualities are going to be transferred to who? To the kids, right? This is why Khalid and Walid, you know how men look for women who, don't have, they're quiet, they're docile, they're easy to control, right? Yeah. Listen to Khalid ibn Walid. Right. Who's Khalid ibn Walid? This is the manliest of men. This is the most courageous, aggressive of men. He brought down the Romans and the Persians. He did it. Radiyallahu ta'ala, of course by Allah's tawfiq. This man. So if this whole idea of men want women who just, yes, sir, right? He would be the one who promotes this. What does Khalid ibn Walid say? Advising young people when they get married. He says, marry the woman who has an opinion and has strong characteristics. Marry a woman who has her opinions and has strong characteristics. Why? Because she will take those and put it in your children. I mean, don't you want your children to be strong people? When your children are with their friends, do you want them to be, okay, whatever you want, succumb to peer pressure? Or do you want them to have a personality, to influence and not be influenced? Where are they going to get that from? Where? You, who's gone all day? And when you come home, you just want to relax and watch TV? Or are they going to get it from the mother? Right? So this whole fad of today where, women who have careers, and we don't want that because they become too independent, and that's exactly what you want. That's exactly what you should be looking for, because that's what they put in your kids. And of course, there are women who have bad characteristics. They have bad character, just like there are men who have bad character. But bad character has nothing to do with whether the woman's independent or not. There are women who are independent and they have terrible character. And there are women who are dependent and they have terrible character. So it has nothing to do with independence. It has everything to do with how they were raised and what kind of a person they are. Well, beyond that, you should look for people who have strong characteristics. And for these men who say, no, we want women who are this and that, and they listen to their husbands, and they don't argue and whatnot. Okay, how are you going to raise your daughter? I look at my daughter, how am I going to raise her? So that when she's at school, she gets pushed around? When someone makes fun of her, it's okay, just take it? Is that how a father is going to raise his daughter? Is he okay with that being his daughter? Is he okay with having his daughter marrying a man who will mistreat her? So why should I expect that from my wife? Like, why should I expect my father-in-law to prepare my wife to be exactly like that? Doesn't make any sense, right? Anyway. So here the chapter is telling us it is part of the role of a man, the man of the household, to teach his family. Now it's a given to teach your children. But here the hadith is saying even teach your wife. Give her the opportunity to learn. Right? I talk about this a lot, but it's bizarre to me. It's frustrating. It's like, I don't want my wife to have a career. I don't want her this. I don't want her that. So you want her to be bored at home, and when she's bored at home, she keeps calling you, and then you get mad. She needs to be occupied with something. Right? She needs to be occupied with something. Let her learn. Encourage her to learn. Right? It's only when has knowledge made a person worse? When? Oh, you'll have these men say, oh, when I brought my wife from the Middle East, she took on feminism. Because she didn't learn feminism. I promise you she's reacting because you're not treating her well. That's when women go to feminism. When you go to school and you learn physics or biology or dentist or whatever it is, they're not teaching you feminism. It's not the way it works. So it is part of the role of the man to teach his household, all of them. Because knowledge in Islam is power. It is empowering. It makes us stronger. It makes us better. A society that has easy access to knowledge and knowledge spreads. Right? I'm talking about real knowledge. I'm not talking about nonsense information, like what celebrities do and what they name their dogs. Right? That is a stronger society. And we went over that hadith that one of the signs of the Day of Judgment is what? The widespread of ignorance. That's when human society begins to just erode, rot from within. Right? So every man should teach his family. If she's already taught and she has her degrees, alhamdulillah, great. If not, encourage her. Right? Encourage her. Find a way. Make it part-time. Let it be online. There are now online learning. Right? It doesn't have to be a big degree where you're going to pay $15,000 a year at UCI. Let her go to Saddleback. Right? Whatever it is. So it should be something we should aspire towards. And if this is the reward of a man treating his slave well, what about his wife? Right? So there's a lot of reward in it. باب عظة الإمام النساء. The chapter of the Imam advising women. Yet again, you have women coming in here. Like this is the unit on knowledge. The Sharia wants us to know that women are part of this project, that they should be taught, they should learn, right? They should be educated, right? In a healthy, reasonable capacity, whether in college or reading books, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be college. It could be reading books. The idea is we want families that are very well informed, very well educated. And it doesn't have to be like knowledge, like giving fatwa. It could be knowledge in terms of how to manage one's finances, how to budget. These are skills that will benefit you, right? The whole, don't you dare tell your wife how much you make, your generation. No, don't tell her, or else she'll take it and she'll spend it all. Well, how do you know that? Maybe if she knows how much you make, it'll be easier for her to know what she can buy, what she can't buy. Anyway, so عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خرج ومعه بلال فظن أنه لم يسمع النساء فوعظهن وأمرهن بالصدقة فجحلت المرأة تلقي القرطة والخاتم وبلال يأخذ في طرف ثوبه. So here the Prophet ﷺ once gave a khutbah, or he said some things, and you don't have microphones back then, and you have a large crowd. So the Prophet felt that the women didn't hear him because they're in the back. So he went to the women and he gave them some information. He educated them, he advised them. And it seems like the nature of what he said, the content of what the Prophet ﷺ said had to do specifically with women and some of the challenges they face in their iman, and some of the challenges that will afflict women in the afterlife. And so all these women began to remove their jewelry and to give it in charity. So this seems pretty similar to a hadith we've gone over it before, and that is women are most of the hellfire. Have we gone over that before? We went over that hadith. Are you sure?
Actually,
We went.
81 and 82.
We didn't do 81?
Yeah, we didn't finish it, so. No, 70.
Yeah, I did 80. We did 81.
No, 70 and 70.
70 and what?
Yeah, that part we missed that.
That's right. We'll go back to it in a second here. All right. So this goes back to the hadith. I think it goes back to the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said women are more in hellfire than men. Right? We went over this, right? We did.
Why would we do it?
Come on, we had to have gone over this.
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't.
No, you didn't.
That was 72.
It was 72?
You have a book?
No, it's not that.
That the last part, the fourth.
No. It's Hadith 72 is something else.
Oh, okay.
I think by now we could have just go over the...
We either have gone over it or it's coming up. And we'll talk about it then.
But now we need to know why we will be more of us in the hell fire than the men. Why?
Why? Are you sure we haven't gone over it?
We heard this, I mean...
I'm pretty sure we went over it.
More women will be in the fire than men, but why? Well, one of the reasons I heard is that because they do a lot of gossip. But that's not the only reason.
before, but you didn't mention it.
Oh, come on, I have to have gone over it. Because I went over it in detail. Please go over it again. Okay, when I start going over it, you'll remember. So the Prophet ﷺ says, women, give a lot of charity because I saw you as the majority of hellfire. Right? The companions, the female companions, said, why? Like what got us there? The Prophet said, تَكْثُرْنَ اللَّعْنَ وَتَكْفُرْنَ الْعَشِيرَ. You curse a lot. May Allah's curse be on you. I remember growing up, I would always hear this from Arabic-speaking women. May Allah curse your mother. which is talking about herself.
Or she's
Right.
saying to a child.
She's saying to her child,
Cursing herself.
yeah, right? Allah yul'an ummak. May Allah curse your mother, and she's her mother. That, like, she's cursing herself. This is very widespread in the Middle East, especially in Palestine. Right? Palestinian women always would say this. Like, it's common. So this is one. This is serious stuff. Like, Allah is serious stuff. When you say, may Allah's curse be upon you, the Prophet says, you're killing that person. Saying, may Allah's curse be upon you, is equivalent to killing them. Now you remember?
I mean, some other class, not the Hadith where you had mentioned it.
So that's one. And number two, takfurna al-ashiyah. You're very ungrateful to your husband. Now you remember? Yeah?
I don't remember it, but I think that is true.
It is true?
I don't remember this.
All right.
People are.
Very ungrateful to your husband. Okay. There's a lot to unpack here. And what I'm about to tell you is not me analyzing the hadith. Because some people will come and say, oh, you're just modernizing the understanding of the hadith. No. What I'm about to tell you, I read from Ibn Hajar, who wrote this 600-700 years ago. For feminism, for any of this stuff. Ibn Hajar is the most respected scholar who explained Bukhari. All right? What does he say? Number one, we are to understand that you are the majority of hellfire in terms of believers who enter hellfire, not in terms of all of humanity who enters hellfire. Because if you just take non-Muslims, what ratio is it between male and female?
Same.
About 50-50, right? About 50-50. If it's 49-51, the Arabic is not going to call the 51 the majority. It just doesn't do that. It's not that precise when it comes to numbers. So it can be talking about just all of humanity, because it will just pan out to be 50-50. So we assume that it's talking about the believers, right? From the believers who end up in hellfire, the majority of them will be women, right? Now, believers who end up in hellfire will go to paradise eventually, right? So Ibn Hajar says, if that's the case in hellfire, then the majority of the inhabitants of paradise are who? Women, right? Although, you can make an argument against that. But, let's just go with it. Or, if you want to look at it differently, if you look at the highest place in paradise, who's there? Who's the highest place in paradise? The Prophet ﷺ, right? So the Prophet is in the highest place in paradise. This is obvious. And who's with him?
His family.
Who's his family? How many?
A lot.
You have 13, including Asiya and Maryam. So the highest level of paradise has one man, 13 women. You see what I mean here? So to say that this hadith is putting women down or putting women at disadvantage is not correct. It's all about how you look at it, right? Secondly, people, or especially women, get upset with this hadith. They're uncomfortable with this hadith because it seems like the reason they end up in hellfire is because of their husbands. Like, my husband, why should I be grateful to my husband? That seems very demeaning. So what does Ibn Hajar say? He says, we have to take this hadith quite literally. Because the Prophet says, a woman's husband who treats her well
Yes.
all the time, now you remember, huh? Who treats her well all the time, and then he does one mistake, or he does one thing that she doesn't like, and she then says, I've never seen any good from you. Now you kind of recalling? So Ibn Hajar says, in order for a woman to have committed a major sin of this type, she needs to have an amazing husband. So if you don't have an amazing husband, and you tell him, man, you're just worthless. This hadith is not to be applied. Thank you. Huh?
Because it is,
No, the thing is, most women are, today, they're not very.
Mhm. That's the second point. The third point is what?
I believe that these young.
There's a third point. This is very important. To say that it is her behavior towards her husband that constitutes a major sin is incorrect. That's not what the hadith is saying. No. What the hadith is actually pointing out to is that this great blessing that she had, who's it from?
last one.
It's from Allah. So when she rejects that blessing, who's she really rejecting? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has nothing to do with the husband. It's not the man. You think Allah is going to put people in hellfire, put women in hellfire because she argued with her husband? Honestly, I mean, are we going to make Allah that small? Like Allah is concerned about petty arguments between husband and wife? Honestly, like a judge is not going to concern him or herself with a petty argument between husband and wife. Oh, I wanted to go to the mall and he didn't want me to go. You think a judge is going to look at that? If a judge does, we would be saying, what are you doing? That actually takes away from your status. Right? You think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to look into these small petty arguments?
No.
He's going to look into big things. Right? So it's not about the husband. It's about her relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If she is blind to this major blessing that Allah has given her, that has been nothing but a source of blessing for her, how is she going to even recognize the other things? How? So in reality, the major sin is coming from her kufran and ni'mah of Allah, rejecting the blessings of Allah. That's what it is. And that's a huge sin. Right? Okay, what about men who do this? Well, the same thing. Well, if a man does the same thing to a wife who's been nothing but good and kind to him, then the same thing applies. Okay, why didn't the Prophet say that? Well, number one, he's talking to women. He's in front of a group of women. Right? Why would he say men and women? And number two, right? Men probably fall into this less. So even if they do fall into it, they fall into it less. So it doesn't need to be pointed out at this level, as the Prophet ﷺ pointed it out to women. All right? I'm pretty sure we went over this.
I think it was in the khutbah, yeah.
You know, it wasn't a khutbah, it wasn't.
I remember a class, one of those evening classes or something, and I meant thank you for explaining it again. Because
Okay.
you hear it so much, like women are going to go now because they don't appreciate this and they don't appreciate that. So thank you for
Yeah, to use this hadith as a weapon against women, that in of itself is a sin. That in of itself is a sin. Okay, so it was brought to my attention that we didn't go over Hadith 72. So we just backtrack a little bit to Hadith 72.
In the 80s we started 83 or 84.
We did 84.
Okay, and then we went back to
We're going to go back to 82 for a second. So عن أنس رضي الله تعالى عنه قال لأحدثنكم حديثا لا يحدثكم أحد بعدي سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إن من أشراط الساعة أن يقل العلم ويظهر الجهل ويظهر الزنا وتكثر النساء ويقل الرجال حتى يكون لل50 امرأة القيم الواحد. So here the Prophet ﷺ says that among these signs of the hour is that knowledge will become less. We've explained that. Number two, obviously as a consequence of that, ignorance becomes widespread. Fornication or haram relationships will become extremely widespread. We discussed this. The new part here is the amount of women will increase and the amount of men will decrease, until there is one man for every 50 women. Okay? All right. If society reaches a point where there's one man for 50 women, this ratio, you have to ask the question, what on earth happened? So the common explanation is massive wars. Massive wars that claimed the lives of tremendous people. Okay. World War II and World War I claimed the lives of 100 million people. 80 years ago. Yet we didn't see this major imbalance. Like, what amount of destruction needs to ensue to completely destroy the ratio of men to women? And normally when there's widespread war, women are killed just as much as men because civilians get caught in the line of fire or they're intentionally targeted, right? Do you see what I mean here? So, I don't think this is referring to a ratio between men and women. Had that been the case, I would think the Prophet would have said, وَتَكْثُرْ الْإِنَاثِ وَيَقِلْ الذُّكُورِ, that there'll be a lot of females and less males. There's a difference between the word inath and nisa, and a difference between the word dhakar and rajul. Inath is a biological term. It refers to the biology or the physiology of a woman. Dhakar refers to the biology, physiology of a man. Nisa, it comes from the word nasi'a, which means to delay or to postpone. Right? To delay or to postpone something. Women are called nisa. It is because there are phases in her life where she needs to kind of pull back a little bit from society. When she's pregnant, right? When she's nursing, when she's raising her kids. A younger mother, do you see her as often as a woman who's not married or a woman whose kids are older? They simply have these responsibilities that prevent them, that kind of delay them, keep them back for a little bit, right? So this is referring to action. Like here, Nisa is describing the female in terms of her actions, how she tends to engage society. Right? Also, with Islamic etiquettes, a woman kind of keeps herself out of certain environments because it's inappropriate for her to be there. Like, it's not part of her femininity. Rajul comes from the word rijl, which is a leg. And a man comes from this word because they're on their legs, they're on their feet all day. Doing what? Working. They're out and about. Right? And then now comes all the technologies and the men are sitting down and they're not on their legs. But notice something. A man who's a couch potato, who's just sitting on the couch all day, has no ambitions, is not working, how does a woman view that man? You're not a man. You're not a man, right? You're not a man. I'm sorry, like I noticed this in like the college students. When there is a man, like one of the young men, who's a leader in a leadership position, doing and going, coming, you can see all of them just they're interested in him. And all the other men who are not doing anything, they're just kind of lingering about. No one's interested in them, right? So here, the word rajul is referring to a male based on their actions, how they are. So how I've come to understand this, wallahu alam, just in a personal opinion, is kind of what's going on now, where the women are all saying, what? Where are the men? It's not that there are no males. There's a lot of males. But where are the men? So there are a lot of females. There's a lot of women, like women who have strong character, they're doing their thing, but very few men. And this seems a type of reality today. And it's a global thing, right? Why it's come to this, there's a lot of reasons. One of those reasons is because billions of dollars are being put in female development, in women's advocacy, in women's, services, which is great. But why aren't the same amount of resources being put into men, to young boys, to young children, males? Right? Why not be fair, at least? It's not that it's wrong to have all this money, all these resources being put into the development of women. And the same needs to be done for men as well. In the end, both of them need to be developed. So while you have these women who are seem to be succeeding more than men, well, that's one. Number two, when you look at the path of success in modern societies, which is highly urbanized. In urban, look, there are rules for everything. Where you can cross the road, when you can cross the road, where you need to be, school, right? And I don't mean this in a positive or negative way. Women seem to thrive more in controlled environments. Men thrive more in uncontrolled environments. Leave a boy out and about, what are they going to do? They're going to jump, they're going to swing, they're going to throw, they're going to do things. That's how they develop their personalities. So in rural areas, or back in the day, when there wasn't all these laws, all this organization, and what young boys did all day is go out into the wilderness, into the woods, spend 8 hours with a bunch of guys, with a bunch of boys, friends, doing whatever, and then come back at sunset, they grew up into men. All right? So this is how it is. So that's how I've come to understand this. That really, it's not an issue of how many males and females there are, it's just the quality of men truly decreases to where women, they just can't find a real man. I don't mean man in terms of the way the West understands it. I'm a man in terms of a man. Allah Ta'ala alam. That's how I come to understand it. We can go ahead and stop there. Hadith number 85. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.